we're going to open it up with the panel, and just really the question is, what does scalability mean to you? We'll start with Matt Lee and then Matt Clines.
What does scalability mean to me? Boy, that's just huge, right? So scalability is really just at its simplest point, the ability to continue to scale with efficient resources without having to have exponential increases in costs so that we are more and more profitable as we continue to scale. And I think that's my simple definition. But what does it mean to scale? You start getting into all the different places where things can fail, right? You know, as you get exponentially larger, I feel like there are larger and larger different iterations of problems that keep happening. And so I think, you know, Matt Clines kind of touched on this when we were just bantering, but you know, there's this constant process of repetition, of process modification, of determining of effectiveness, of determining of efficiency, right? And also what changed? What does our clients change? What does our clients change? What has moved in our world, and continue to adapt to that? Now in a situation where you're just like large ocean liners, you don't turn so quickly in the harbor, right? And I think some of those things become, how do you balance that agility aspect you lose with the ability to continue to scale and deal with all the things? And so, you know, a lot to unpack in that question, but my answer is, it's just, scale means to iterate, I think, and it means to have to continue to change faster than you would have in the past. So not known for succinct answers. I'll pass it off to anybody else who wants to tackle it.
Who's Matt Clines?
Yeah, that's a good answer, actually. And it's, for us, I mean, it's really about process, you know, and scaling process, and trying to figure out, and I guess not being afraid to go back on something that failed in the past, because we're changing so much and evolving. You know, the offerings are changing, technology's changing, but being able to make sure that we're documenting these processes and then go back to be able to evaluate them in the future, to make sure that we didn't miss something. You know, I'm lucky I have a team, a management team that's all about getting better all the time. So we're always reevaluating, you know, what we're doing wrong. We have a hard time actually patting ourselves on the back, which we've realized recently. So we like to complain about the problems a little bit more than take that time. And I think it's important, especially nowadays, to celebrate those successes.
That's 100%. I agree. I mean, I think that, you know, joking aside, we focus on all the things that still need to be solved, but rarely do we look back and go, man, there's a giant paved road behind us with beautiful lines and everything's wonderful and it's smooth. And yeah, I don't take enough time to go back and look at the positives either. That's a good point, Matt.
Yeah.
Kevin Blake, what are your thoughts?
So, I mean, both great answers. I don't want to be repetitive, so I want to bring as much value to the attendees as possible. But, you know, for us, I mean, when you look at the stages as you're growing through an MSP, typical growth, I mean, kind of get stuck at certain milestones, and I knew I wanted to grow, and you know, so in order to grow, we had to be able to scale, be able to add business, be able to, you know, 20, 30, 50, even double. We're doing it through acquisition and through organic, but I knew every aspect of the business had to be ready, and so we brought in consultants, and we went through, and it's just not my strength, right? So I'm the visionary. I fly up high, so. You know, for me, I have no problem going and saying, hey, I just bought this company, and letting the rest of the people kind of stress and work now. And we would get through it, but you know, there was a cost. So, you know, I love my team. I as well, same with both Matts, have a great senior team, and they were constantly dissecting what we're doing and how we're doing it, and documenting it and going through all the processes to see how we get better. We did an acquisition on March 9th, and you know, we were just in a leadership team meeting a couple of weeks ago, and they're critical of it. I'm like, critical of it. We haven't lost a single customer. The entire plan we put together is on track. We were ahead of schedule on synergies that we projected. I said, guys, we need to take a minute here and just, you know. So the whole concept of this seminar is pretty good, because you see a lot of MSP owners get stuck at certain levels, whether that's figuring out how to sell past the owner, or put in middle management, or putting in sales processes beyond the owner. So I'm happy to be here, and this is a good topic to hit. So,
great. And Joe, Alapat, what are your thoughts on scaling an MSP, and you know, being having been part of selling an MSP a few years back? You know, what were some of the learnings that you had from growing that business?
Well, I would want to go back to that initial question of what does scalability mean to answer that question, and I'd echo Kevin's statement around just being ecstatic and proud of the team that we built, and also the statement Matt Clines mentioned around celebrating. We call it celebrating the wins, and it's something that is part of our core values when we talk about focusing on visible progress. And you have to take time to celebrate those wins. Otherwise, you can't appreciate the step that you've taken. But really, when I think about scalability, I think about obstacle removal. It's a concept that I learned from reading a lot on Peter Drucker on management style. And that's, what is the obstacle that's holding the organization back from achieving its next goal? And so as a leader in an organization or at any level of the organization, it's always a good question to ask your team, what obstacle are you facing that I can help remove? And if you've removed that obstacle, you've created an opportunity for scale. And so that could be, a technology, that could be a team, a slot, a seat on the team that needs to be filled. It could be any of those things. But those are all, things that need to be addressed to hit a goal that organizationally that you're trying to hit. And so those are the things that come top of mind. And when I think about an MSP, I joke about the analogy with, thinking about it like a franchise, thinking about it like a Starbucks. And really the concept is that if you're going to serve that cup of coffee consistently to every customer, and the same goes for an MSP that's providing a very complex service model to the customer, having that same challenge of delivering that consistent service, how do you do that at scale? And you're going to do that with processes. You're going to do that with culture. You're going to do that through maintaining a level of consistency across the organization as it grows. And then maybe like what Kevin said, where you acquire another company and you hit a new geographic region. How do you continue to replicate that same success in another region? Right? It's so challenging. But it really comes down to thinking about, an MSP like a franchise model. There's a really good book that I don't recommend enough. It's a book called E-Myth, and it talks about, these concepts of building systems. And I just reviewed it briefly recently and just saw the overlap between that and EOS. And I'd never connected the dots that they have so much overlap between each other. But yeah, so those are the things that I think about when we're thinking about scaling an MSP, Mark.
Yeah. So then, see, we got some poll results here. So the hurdles in growing the business. 4 people actually stood up and said that it was all right. Good for you guys. It's about being vulnerable. And then, do you have all the processes documented? And a lot here today said that they don't feel they need to. So, why don't we talk about that? We can start with Kevin Blake about process. We talked about it's iterative. I think that's kind of what I heard. But why don't you talk about kind of how the process, you're documenting it, you're building it, you're evolving it. Kind of walk us through what you're doing at ICS.
Sure. I just want to comment quick though on that survey result. So I think everybody should have picked myself, the CEO, president. I mean, it's always the top, right? You turn that Coke bottle over and if that's the owner, that's how much can go through the funnel. So we are generally the bottlenecks, and it takes a strong network. Somebody's going to tell you, you're the problem. And they're all fixable, but it's quick blurb. So you want to talk what the question was about?
Yeah, well, actually, Kevin, why don't you talk about that? So how does the CEO remove himself?
Yeah, because that is typically, when I, through my peer group networks and different organizations I get involved with MSP, I'm pretty plugged in the channel. When you start dissecting, what are the bottlenecks to growth? It almost always is at the top. I mean, when I look at my organization, I like to think of it flipped upside down. I work for the people above me, right? So I don't want to be the bottleneck. If I'm getting stuck at it, there was a time, back in like 09, 10, when we were stuck at that $8 to $1 million range. I just couldn't get past it. I'm blaming everybody. And then I did a SWOT down on myself and had some industry experts come in and look at me and say, you're the problem. You haven't put the right structure in place to grow. I mean, you're expecting the same people to do this, and it's just not it. So, the reason I brought that up, I mean, you have to surround yourself with people that are going to be honest with you, hold you accountable. That is the key. I mean, you got to be open to it as well. I mean, the worst thing in my mind for an owner of a business is an ego, right? So you got to take egos out of it and be open to criticism, be open to have collaborative, transparent conversations with people and listen. I think that is the absolute key, and that's where a lot of people get stuck.
All right. Matt Lee?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Just so everybody knows my history, I am not the CEO of Iconic. I am a shareholder, but not a majority shareholder at all in Iconic. But I came up with a CEO, Chris Hoos, who probably some of you may be familiar with. But Chris Hoos is the key visionary of our company from the time that I started in 2011 to the time that we merged in mid-July 2019 to become Iconic. And the reason I bring it up is that Mike Fowler is also our CEO in the same way as Chris was. Very visionary, but had a team of people all with their own lanes, if you will, of what their responsibilities should be, and a huge swath of creative ability behind that, right? And I didn't feel like I ever had to go to Chris to ask questions about things that I knew were well within my decision space. And I think that when you talk about the remove yourself, I don't think it means remove yourself. I think the vision, the leadership, the drive, the culture, all of those have to come from the top down. They have to be, but he's got to be off to the side in a way that all of the other operations and all of the other things that need to work with each other independent of that decision-making bottleneck have that ability, feel like they know what their constraints are and for the decision lanes, understand the common mission of the organization, and can go and build that at scale. Because I don't know accounting processes. I couldn't tell you our sales processes. But if you wanted me to talk about separations of duties and how we lay out our security systems and how we develop product and go to markets with technologies, I could certainly talk about those things. And I think that's the point, is that was the biggest thing for me to have to make the transition, as you talk about those different hit points, right? Was to go, I can't know it all. I literally can't know it all, even outside just the walls of my lanes, right? And I think that's where, scale gets interesting. But anyways, just wanted to bring up that correlation that I always felt like throughout our iterations of scale, that it was always because I had great leadership, someone to back me, but not someone necessarily to dictate the things that were maybe outside of their purview as well. So.
Sure.
Hey, Mark, I just wanted to add a comment there. I think Matt and Kevin are onto something there. And it, I see Jim Barry. Hey there, Jim Barry, made a comment around that, about removing yourself. And I think it's important to point out, to reiterate what Matt was saying. The vision has to be there. And if the vision's not there, the ship is going to get lost. The key, though, is that, what are the things that you need to elevate and then delegate, further to other folks, so that you no longer are, that bottleneck that's holding the organization back. And it does take this sense of vulnerability, like Kevin, like, what you were stating, in a webinar, it takes a lot of courage, right? To be able to state that and be vulnerable and say that, I am a bottleneck at times and a lot of times. And so I've seen the same thing, how I've held my organization back. And what I've found is having team members that are sharper than you in their respective areas is the best way for you to really elevate your game. And also their critical commentary can sometimes feel like a punch in the mouth. But if you're willing to just, kind of just ask, well, tell me why, and, maybe tell them to soften the punch a little bit next time, but then you just, listen to it, you really do learn a lot. And you really understand how, there's room for improvement in being able to enable the other team members to really execute and for you to take a step back and still guide the ship without a doubt.
Right. Yeah, so Matt Clines, what are your thoughts on this topic then, of having that visionary kind of remove themselves from the day-to-day meetings?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's definitely necessary, but I think it comes down to what Kevin said was, looking at the structure, and I mean, we constantly have to reevaluate the structure and who's doing what in the company at each different level. And just like Kevin, we Ergos grows through acquisition mostly, and we've done 4 in 2020 so far. It's really about who's best at doing this. But when you start out and you're a 12-person MSP and you've got one person doing office, back office tasks, and they're doing everything from invoicing to accounting to mailing to, we're at a point now where I've got one person doing accounts payable, one person, doing receivables, with a team of support behind them, through integrations. We have an acquisition integration team now, that's a dedicated team, and it's, obviously you need to get to scale to be able to have that, but we also had to have the foresight to be able to plan out that ahead of time and know, hey, we've reached a point where we need to tip the scale in order to get to scale, if that makes any sense. But yeah, it's a hard thing. I like to say that I'm self-aware, but I know that I'm not all the time. So it really comes down to, one of the things I find interesting is, and I was talking with one of my managers today, was, there's certain things that hit my desk that really shouldn't hit my desk that I immediately jump on, and I just, I like to get things done. And then there's things that never hit my desk that really should have hit my desk. And it's really trying to work through the teams of, hey, here are the things, that should hit my desk, and here are the things that don't. And then me doing a little bit better job of not, going deep into those trenches, on everything that does hit my desk.
Sure. So
I can comment quick on Jim. I don't know what size Jim is or his experience, but he made a comment in the chat. I don't know if everybody see the chat about getting lost as a leader, and and I know that could be a confusing type point, right? And it's not about that. I mean, that was my problem. I got stuck at that 6 to 8 million range for years, and came in when some people came into the SWAT, they basically said, well, here's your problem, right? There's you, and then there's 32, every decision goes through you. So it's not that I'm removing myself, but I'm defining swim lanes and hiring, putting in a layer of middle management, per se, or leadership team, and letting them sink or swim, right? So when I say remove myself, I'm not allowing people to walk past me in the hall and say, can you believe this? And I'll nod my head, and they'll say, Kevin agrees with me. And like, I had to remove myself from just being able to be, allowing my leadership team to make decisions, not get trumped by my presence. So I was still very involved in leading in the face of the company and setting the direction and the ultimate cheerleader. But as far as the day-to-day tactical execution was happening through the team. So I just wanted to follow up on that point.
any more to add on there? I think I caught one thing here, and we can maybe talk about that. How about, we actually had a culture session a few hours ago, and it kind of brought it up. How much does culture, what does that mean to scalability in the organization? How much does that affect the scalability of the org? Could start with Matt Lee.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably one of the hardest things to manage, right? When you first start out and it's 7 of you, and now for us it's 170 something, right? You're always adding more than you have as your balance of culture maintainers, right? You started with, let's say, something that worked really well, and each org had their 17 or 20 people that grew into 30 or 40, and it worked really well for them. How do you maintain that culture as you bring in more people? And I think it takes a lot of very on purpose things, but it does affect scale in the sense that you might have, let's say, a very robust security program for your internal assets and all of these things that go along with this vision of not being that next company as an MSP that gets breached and not being that company that fails our clients in that regard. And then you go put these fairly heavy-handed security controls on somebody that maybe doesn't have that vision, right? That their culture isn't one of security, isn't one of those things first, potentially. And I'm narrowing in on my lane. I mean, I think you said that perfectly, Kevin, is you're defining those swim lanes, right? I have well-defined swim lanes, and I love living in them. But I think that the cultural aspects are what make or break the adoption of process, the growth of that customer experience and our customers' experience, right? As we continue to take another, as Matt said, we grow through acquisition. How do you take what worked that made them an acquisition target for you and bring in what is your roadmap and your menu and what it's going to taste like to be at Ergos? How do you change that? And I think that is the question that everybody that's smarter than me in those capabilities, like Mike Fowler and Jeff and our HR and experience departments, but how do you continue to codify that and let it change as it needs to, right? As you do bring in strategic mergers and as you do bring in other things that might need some re-adoption of some of those potentially. So don't have a whole lot more to add than these other fine gentlemen here on that, but I would say that is probably the biggest challenge to overall adoption of all of the parts of the whole for what we're doing.
Yeah, I was going to say that it's, culture is definitely hard to replicate. It's also hard to swallow when it's forced upon you. So, it's one of those things, and Kevin and I had this discussion in the past about, you try to do through acquisition, you're doing lots of different things and bringing in different teams with different opinions, different leadership styles. At the end of the day, you have to force your culture a little bit down. But culture is a living, breathing thing, right? It's going to morph over time. You just got to make sure that your people buy off on all of it. And Kevin and I kind of have the same philosophy. What we find out it's honesty, and that's the biggest thing that you're going to get out of it when you're bringing in people. You have to be honest with what's going to happen from a people and a process standpoint, and that's how you build the trust first of all. And then when they once they get inside of Ergos, just like you guys, we have the same problems as different problems, but at different levels all the time. You can talk to any MSP, and documentation is always a problem, right, Joe? It's true. That's one of the things that always pops up, no matter if you're a 5-person MSP or a 500-person MSP, and it's creating that culture of, one of our, our pillars or golden rules is that's the top one is documentation, communication, documentation. Those are our top two. And it's that important to us. Kevin, you would?
Yeah, you said a lot of the way I feel. The only point I'll make is through acquisition. Culture is, in my opinion, it's our secret weapon. People always ask me, our team will walk through fire because it's just who we are, right? And you don't get a culture by saying this is our culture, or hanging signs and saying these are my core values. It all becomes action, which is why it's so hard. Like Matt said in the beginning about during acquisition. When you're trying to infuse culture, it comes through, example, right? When you're onboarding somebody, whatever pops up, whatever decision happens, how you handle it from the top down, right? Or bottom up, and however you want to look at it. Culture is that thing you have to be intentional about.
And I think I can add to that. I think the core values themselves are a multiplier effect for the company. They largely, if you really take them seriously, you hire based on them, you message around them consistently, and you see your team members actually using those core values as phrases. That's something that we have these kinds of catchphrases that are associated to the core values. You really start to see how it takes effect. And I can't appreciate how difficult it must be for you all who are acquiring other MSPs, how challenging that must be to figure out, okay, they have these core values, we have these core values. And that must be that could be a whole topic in a session to itself, just to process that. One thing I have learned is when bringing on new folks, the number one core value that we have is listen and learn. And that's just, humbly, like expecting that they be humble listeners, but ourselves also do the same thing to try to absorb and understand, okay, why is it that you are doing something a certain way, or why are you an expert at this? And why are you having this opinion? To truly understand that before necessarily developing, a decision around something. And for us, it's something that I didn't have at my previous company, that we have at Liongard, and it's just a platform on which we're able to build on. So to me, it's like you can't have scalability unless you have the culture, because the team is what thrives on that culture, and you need the team to scale the business.
And when we were at Choose Networks, when it was just the one regional MSP, we focused heavily on our core values. And what was neat is to watch it. We kind of initially, like you said, Kevin, I guess we kind of made them up. Like we kind of said, what do we do? We did a SWOT, just like you said, and we kind of came out with, what are the things we're all doing? Well, here's our core values. But then we made them into little icons. We made a banner that you had as soon as you got there, and you got an icon assigned when you got caught doing one of those core values. And it's one of those where everybody made that a gamified kind of thing that helped us extend that out as we continued to scale and grow. But I think when you step into the acquisition model, You're now pushing culture. Like someone said, it doesn't feel good when it's forced upon you. Matt, I believe that was you, but you're also putting them in massive consternation, right? You're taking very technical people that are very opinionated down a certain, potential vein and changing that because it's the things that's most efficient for us, or it's the thing that we can negotiate from a cost perspective. And so not only are you asking them to absorb and modify some culture, you're also injecting this artificial stress, right? That comes with that merger. And I think, in another talk when we were prepping for this, I think it was Matt or Kevin that said, you have to be honest and you have to set expectations and be brutally honest about the acquisition so that you set the proper, expectations. But I would wager, and Matt or Kevin, whoever speaks best to this, you guys are looking for your acquisitions to have a similar culture and having similar things that made that consternation maybe less and made the adoption of that culture, much more strategic, right? Where it's already kind of pre-aligned. Is that something you found as you're looking at your acquisitions that goes into the factor of whether you buy somebody or acquire them?
For us, the core values / culture is a filter for everything. So yeah, there's some variables there, right? So you're looking for the folks that are staying on, trying to judge their core values, and it's not something like take a test and here's your core values. It's through interaction. It's challenging, right? It's through looking at social media stuff and having conversations, trying to figure out what's important to folks. Yeah, it's absolutely something that is top of the list when you're doing due diligence.
Yeah, I was going to say, actually, one of the things, it's not really something that we look for, because if we find a company that has a misalignment, it actually a lot of times works out better for us when the employees come into Ergos and see the structure and see how we're doing things. They can easily buy off better on our culture. So it's not a stop if there isn't that type of core value alignment. I guess that's the easiest way to put it.
That's interesting because it could mean that someone could jump faster to an adoption of your way of doing things because of their dissatisfaction with a prior culture.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I, the opposite happens as well. Like I said, I'm honest. We've had some disasters.
Yeah.
Patrick has a question here. I'll just read it. As you scale and expand the technical team, how many techs do you have per endpoints managed? At what point do you transition from a general technician to specific areas like servers, network, et cetera? Any thoughts on that? Do you have a certain scale?
I would have to. I can tell you that we've switched our service delivery model to. I mean, how many techs we have? 60 or 70, but we switched our service model to ITIL, and it's made a world of difference for us as far as the amount of resource required to support so many endpoints. I don't know the numbers, so not that close to that piece of it, but that's our service delivery structure.
Yeah, I would say there's not a magic bullet on this one, right? Because it's going to be about your service model, what you've chosen to deliver. It's going to be about what you have from a resource capacitance, what you have from an automation capacitance, what you have for the client use. And so I don't think there's a silver bullet, but I will say that there are needs for that service delivery model to change, right? And as you scale, and we've realized that, and I'll tell you a really quick story that I'm not known for is quick stories, but we had it to where initially it was, everybody knows. So we had it where initially, we were having anybody could go to a client, right? Well, when there's 20 clients, that's fantastic for the 6 people that are going. But when you have 140 clients in a region, and now there's 20 technical people that might go, there's no intimacy. The client doesn't feel any of that. No one knows everything that's going on contextually anymore, right? You just don't have that, like I said, intimacy anymore with the client. And so, we've had to shift delivery models many times, and sometimes landing on ones where there's one resource that works for the client, but they have 4 shared resources pooled between 2 IAs or, different models. But I would say that, ITIL, Kevin, that's a great suggestion because it does head straight down that path of let's follow what's already a standard. But, just understand that back to what my initial point and our first point was, it's going to change, but be ready to assess it, see how the clients experience your service as you do that, right? Because at the end of the day, we're not a technical company, we're a customer experience company, right? That's all we really are. I mean, it really is that efficiency and customer experience. And so, those are the things where it's going to change a lot, and there's going to be so many variables that I would be remiss to say, here's the time frame and here's what you should expect. But I will say, get with peers,
Yeah.
have conversations about that, learn people your size as you iterate and grow, change if you need to when you've exceeded the capacitance of a peer group potentially. But yeah, great question.
I think one other thing I might add to that is it's helpful if you're thinking through those types of metrics is to actually trend from a scorecard metric ratios. So if you're interested in that topic, then look at headcount per endpoint and see how you're doing month upon month, year upon year, and keep track of it. Same thing goes the annual recurring revenue, generated per employee. There are metrics like that that are very important that you can track, and then you can then compare against peers, and then just track to go, okay, well, how am I doing here? So that's the way I would think about it. But most importantly, trend how you're doing over time, so you can just measure against yourself.
Yeah.
And do you feel like you're improving, and do you feel that's good, or is that and then put a goal to get to somewhere.
Yeah, we kind of look at customer service scores and profitability. Those are the two, and try to move those back up and down. But yeah, as Matt said, we've changed models, 7 or 8 times in the past 10 years, trying to figure out what works best. And, currently we're we run partner success managers, which are the customer advocates. So that doesn't get lost. And those might not be technical people, but rely on a team of technical people to bring in. From a help desk perspective, currently we run technical pods. So we're essentially running tickets into teams rather than into individuals, and we're trying to expand upon that as well. So, it actually makes it easier. And obviously we have the advantage of being a little bit larger, so we have the scale, but we get the advantage of not having to hire that, all around unicorn technician that everybody looks for all the time. The one that's great in front of clients, that knows everything about everything and will, work for 20 grand a year. It's just, they're becoming harder and harder to find, but but when you do that, you can actually use, again, it's that, making a compartment for where you need the help. And we do that all via metrics. We're looking at types, subtypes, and items, looking at the tickets that are coming in, and where we need the help and where we need the focus. That's also a driver for creating process, and then creating, run books on situations and where we need help, and automation. It all kind of fits together, but definitely metrics we're very metrics driven. But Matt already took my line. We look at ourselves as a customer service company first. So that's the most important thing at Ergos.
Yeah, those are all good, awesome points there, Matt. And the other thing, I noticed it in the chat, Greg talked about, service leadership and other peer groups where they collect this type of data. So comparing it against other peers using those types of groups is definitely a quick way to gain a comparison. So no doubt, good point.
Joe, you touched on it. When I ask the rest of the team here, Joe mentioned Starbucks. What does it mean that developing that your MSP is like a franchise model? We can start with Kevin.
It just means there's not, you've got processes documented out. So, when you take on a new client, these are the steps you're going to take, about how much time it's going to take, what the outcome should be. So you have something to measure against. It's basically, it's a reflection of what we first talked about. It's having everything processed out, so you're not like muscle and feeling your way through any decision when it comes to any piece of the business, really. So whether that's happening in your main office or a branch office or a new acquisition, you should have a timeline on when you're going to get your processes in place. So that's there's no surprises. So, and that's required when you grow. I mean, most of Matt, I mean, they well over 100 individuals, right? So it's you needed to be able to have anybody pick up that phone and know exactly how something was configured, or something was documented, or something. It shouldn't veer from your standard. And that's when you go to Starbucks and you order your whatever you order, it's, you know exactly what it's going to taste in the cup and how long it's going to take to get it. And that's kind of the same thing you're trying to provide. And it's that customer experience.
Right.
Yeah, we got kind of a saying, it's getting everybody working the same way.
Yeah.
No matter what, department they're in, or, if they're a technician in their field or their partner success manager, knowing, that process and how to look it up. I was lucky. We acquired Ergos in 2010, and Ergos had already created a documentation system that was a single pane of glass between ConnectWise and the RMN, which was Zenith at the time, but then we switched it to using LabTech and so on and so forth. But that documentation system is the first place that anyone goes, where we're putting special notes or global alerts, that type of stuff. So all of our technicians work out of that portal. I know IT Glue provides all of that today. So, but that's the thing, getting everybody, hey, this is what you do first, and starting there. I guess the one point is it's hard from that. I think there's a mentality that some MSPs have, that they want to get everybody into that, that cookie cutter, providing the same exact solution, the same offerings, the same hardware. I don't know if that's going to work for us. I mean, just across industry, through acquisition, when you acquire a company that, we'll use firewall as an example, that was a Sonic Wall shop, and now another is a Fortinet shop, and trying to figure out, we're not going to go to that client and then say, okay, you have to use all Meraki from now on. That just doesn't fly, I think, from the customer experience point of view. But getting down the basics around all of those products, because at the end of the day, they're the same thing. They might have a different interface, but it's still a firewall at the end of the day. So making judgments that way has also been useful.
And I'll add on and maybe even counter some of those points in a sense of, I think, scalability is some degree of controlling homogeneity. Right, it's some degree of saying how similar can it be. Now, I understand, Matt, to your point of, if we've sold a firewall to someone, then that's not something we can come back and say, I know you just spent 2,000, let's spend another 1,000 for this, no purpose. But I will say, in so much as we can control those variables and control it within our seat price, make great deals with large vendors to start having a path that allows me to cash flow that replacement into my existing seat price and cost and things like that. Strategies like that will allow scale, all at the same time, while the use of products becomes more homogeneic, right? As more and more people are all on the same platform, they're using Teams, they're using Microsoft Documents, they're using the same SaaS apps in the top 25 of that SaaS app list, right? As we start seeing that, we're starting to see scale develop through just pure homogeneity, right? Through just driving the same thing down to the customer experience, right? If I can make a template and have that apply, and as Liongard extends their capabilities into driving other things and making sense of all these other SaaS applications potentially, there's going to be the capability to drive scale just through pure homogeneity, when all we have to bring is the experience and that business use case and business conversation. Like, we don't hire technicians the same way we did. We're hiring people that can sit and have a business conversation and talk about restore time objectives and point objectives in their systems and SaaS applications and identity and those extensibilities going forward. So I do think that scale comes at driving homogeneity. And I think it's about paying attention to the pieces that survive this pivot, right? And I think the servers and server backup and maybe which physical hardware you're on from a firewall, you're right. Some of those things don't matter as we drive points of consumption down to my basement where I'm sitting on a work asset that's never going to touch that network, right? And I think you're bringing a point that does come up to that. I do have a few homogeneous delineations for sure. Greg, that's hilarious. Anyways, I'm off my rails, but the point is that I think that we're actually entering into a world of beautiful profit for us as we start to understand that all we have to do is control the 35 similar pieces, when it used to be thousands of variations based on server patch level and server OS and which hardware they wanted to buy and what kind of different game. So
I think the one thing I might add to Matt's statement, Matt Clines' statement around, the struggle of trying to figure out how to try to get to that, the I'm going to say homogenous statement, just for you, Matt Lee. But it's always a challenge, right, to try to get to that. And so for us, from a Liongard perspective, I theorize about, a future where it's like, the managed service provider is providing a set of managed workflows that are part of a managed service that they have promised to the customer. And in that managed workflow are these managed actions and activities that are taking place, and that is abstract of the actual platform that's being provided. And so sometimes it is a struggle to figure out, to try to convert, let's say, a customer from AWS to Azure, and yet you want to work with that customer. So you're left with that decision of, okay, do I say no to the customer or not? And traditionally you'll say no, because you know what, that's not an area of expertise. But if you could, is there a way to think about managing infrastructure in a way that is abstract of what that vendor offering is? And if you could, then you'd want to try to go there to try to orchestrate across all of it, so that you can service that customer. Because the reality is a lot of your customers have hybrid type infrastructure that might not be limited to just one thing anyway. And they're going to move to these other SaaS platforms. Like, I'm sure many of the end customers have Slack already. So are they ready to move to Teams or not? And some of them might not be. And so what do? Right? Do you say, well, I don't support Slack? Or do you come up with a way to manage Slack and you're not trying to fight the fight? So that's a tough one, right, to figure that out. And my take on it is technology and capability should rule the day, and the MSP should be the IT department that far exceeds what an internal IT department does, because an MSP rocks and they're able to figure that out for them, right?
To the one point you made, and I know I'm maybe a broken record on this, but I think the reason you can support a Slack and a Teams is that they are very definable objects with edges and how they function, right? And there's less and less of them. It's not like we're looking at 400 different ones that rule the market. We're really focusing on 5 or 7 at any given time in any category, right? So I think that does make it more scalable, even with those delineations, because the number of deltas is less.
Sure. Same point.
So Kevin, last time we talked about M&A and scalability. We spent a lot of time on it. And so as an MSP is growing and looking at acquisitions, things like that, why don't you just kind of talk about how, you're setting yourself up for success for acquiring that company and pulling in their customers, and talk about that a little bit.
Sure. It doesn't happen by just hoping it happens. It happens by executing an M&A playbook. And that's just not something that we developed, got a couple meetings in a week and got it going. Something we've been working on for years. And, I used to think, let's shrink it. And now it's like, 500 or 600 different things that have dependencies on it and are right. And, we have a pretty thought out plan as far as from after due diligence and close of sale of what we're trying to execute and how we're trying to, the different milestones, right? So how fast can we get our ConnectWises, if they're on ConnectWise merge versus, then we have teams where we'll go hit the top 10 customers to try to, that first 30 days, we have a team that's focused on the internal resources, getting them to understand our vision, who they report to, what's the ICS way. And then we have a team focused on telling the key customers and vendors individually, while we're behind the scenes. We have another team doing tools. So there's a lot going on as you're trying to, after you execute. It's not just you just buy somebody and plug them in. There's a lot to it. But if you do it properly, you're very transparent from day one of actually pre-LOI, pre-NDA, and of what your intent is and what you're trying to do. It generally is pretty successful. We found the easiest side is the customer side. Customers will generally give you a shot. Yeah. It's more the employee side and the culture, and well, we used to use Slack and we'll use Teams. Stuff like those. I'm just using examples. Stuff like that. Those are usually the little hurdles where people don't like change. So you're kind of moving their cheese around a little bit, and you're telling them this is how we do it, and they'll say, well, we love this tool, and you just have to stick to your guns and and explain the why. And you can't concede. So. It's being, like we said at the beginning, transparent. It's being intentional, strategic, and not reactionary, right? And you got to take emotion out of it and really walk through each decision. And you handle it based on with your core values in mind, right? So it's not a dictatorship, but it is the way it is. So it's just a way of communicating and a way of executing a plan. It really is what it is. It's a big project plan. It's executing it with humans involved. If you have the ability to do that and you have your team set up, you'll be successful. So,
Matt Clines, do you have anything to kind of add to that?
No, that's actually pretty much all it is. It's on the people part. we did surrender some of that stuff early on with some of our acquisitions, and that was a mistake. Saying, oh, okay, we're going to try to do it the way that you were doing it, or let you continue to do it the way that you were doing it, and it ends up not working. But again, going back to the honesty is the biggest thing. Having a clear plan. We run the same way. We've got a book. We got a 30, 60, 90, 120-day plan that we roll out. Actually, I was going to ask you, Kevin, how you're dealing with. I think you said you were in the middle of an acquisition, but for us, obviously 2020 has been a strange time, and I personally like to go and sit one-on-one with each employee, and have that face-to-face conversation. And I don't know about you, but I don't feel like I get the same results from a Zoom call as I do from a personal interaction. So that's been a little bit tougher. And getting people, although, we haven't lost anybody. No one's been freaked out about the changes and left, but I feel like it's been a little bit more difficult these days than it was in the past, just from that sheer remote problem we have.
It's definitely a challenge. It's hard to read the body language and try to sense who maybe needs a little bit extra touching through a video conference versus face to face, right? So
yeah,
I agree.
I think just a kind of a question back to you guys, just to reverse it, for those MSPs that are looking to be acquired, what are the kind of top things that you all look for that are like, wow, this is great, that this is a good positive sign in terms of wanting to do an acquisition?
High operational maturity level. I mean, I think for us, it's having a higher OML and somebody that already has some degree of processes. They may already be owned by private equity, but really it's the ones that are similar to what our each geo was, right? Like the from that size and scale perspective, and have very similar processes already lined out. So, I mean, granted, I'm a little bit of a vein in this because I do great, but Chris Hoos leads our acquisitions team, but I know that that's one of the things they're looking at, and I will say that we did have a due diligence fall apart just recently because of, some things that we learned way late into the due diligence that we'll check for earlier next time. And back to Kevin's point about the questions and how long it is and how many things we're doing and all the different things in that giant project plan, just after our first few passes of acquisitions, because we're at 7 total wrap-ups now, it's nuts just to think of how much we learned this time, let alone what we'll learn next time and the next time. And great example of what you brought up, Kevin, is we bought one that has a CSP and they're making 1% more than we are. But we're actually on the verge of deciding to try to let them figure it out, right? And maybe keep it, or maybe we don't. But it's going to hit operations so hard just from not having the same scalable accounting process, the same scalable delivery of the service, the same, all those things when we've made that decision a long time ago. And yet here we are kind of teetering on that decision to have a delineation in our operations just to try to make it okay for a larger acquisition we wrapped up, right? And so, I feel like I'm where you were before, and I'm just now about to learn these, school of hard knocks lessons, unfortunately, potentially. So,
I would say, to answer your question, Joe, if I was a MSP owner and I was looking to sell and I was going to sit with Matt or myself, I mean, having a clear defined, list of what's important for you, right? Where I get frustrated and we walk away from a lot of deals is when that goalpost moves, right? You sit with somebody and this is what I want, and this is how I want to be, who you want to treat it after the sale. And that just keeps changing, or, you're not getting all the information up front, or, I just didn't realize that. I have as well. I mean, I had one fall apart that I spent well over 6 figures on, and thinking back through, the signs were there, and, they were there. I mean, I just could close the blind eye because I wanted it so bad, and I won't anymore. I mean, I won't veer from my gut. I mean, it's so being transparent, knowing what you want, knowing what's important to you. You may not get everything, but at least if you put it out there, well, So that's really how I feel.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, Kevin. That's we actually don't. We've done about 20, I'd say maybe 22 acquisitions since 2010. And there's only a handful of former owners that are still with us. because I don't think that they were honest with what they wanted to do. I think, one of the first things that an owner needs to do after they sell is take a break, and kind of relax a little bit and think, hey, I accomplished something great, and now I can accomplish something greater as a member of this bigger team. But I guess, to Joe's question, mine would be clean finance. Have your balance sheet and your P&L statement easy to read. If you're in service leadership or HTG or one of those that formats it in Dipple's format, that's great. But you got to make sure it's there. And everybody has their own stuff on the side. Maybe your other car payment or your beach house or that type of stuff. But make sure that that's easy to move out, because to Kevin's point, we don't like finding that way down the road and saying, well, wait a minute, what's this? But from an operational standpoint, we've kind of seen everything happen, and it's as long as they have clear goals in mind, I guess that's the biggest thing for me.
Yeah, so it seems like the concept, there seems to be, consistency of vision and, not a waffling kind of approach, and then execution and OML. I mean, to me, it's that tie back to scalability in a lot of ways. If, whether you're acquiring or seeking to be acquired, it's top of mind.
Yeah, one of the things we talk about with our management team a lot about when we're trying to design a process is, hey, think of it, how it's going to solve an issue today, but how is it going to solve a problem when we're double in size or when we're in 15 more markets? We were trying a regional management, operational management approach, which we're kind of, bringing, destroying right now and trying something different. And really that's because of COVID and how we're all working today, and being able to think of things differently. But it's always, hey, here's how it's going to solve this problem today. But once we double in size or triple in size, how is that going to work? Is this process going to hold true, or we're going to have to redesign it completely? So you get a lot of interesting answers when you do it that way.
That's a good point.
I'll quickly plug, thank you, Liongard, for putting this on. But part of the key to success and scaling your business is, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, I don't even know if I had a tool set line on my P&L. And now we are so reliant on tools, right? So you got to embrace them. It allows you to scale, and the use of AI is getting incorporated. It's coming down the pipe. They're going to come through these tools and wrapping processes around them. So, we are so reliant on tools. I mean, they run our business. So I think somebody asked earlier about when you need more techs and whatnot. If you have the right tools in place, they'll tell you.
Yeah. At the risk of a ubiquitous plug for Liongard, I would say, look at the breadth at which they already adopt cloud management products of visibility to give your technicians, contextualization, right? Down to local on-prem AD. Here's your cloud stuff. Here's the things that we can tell you about. Here's all the different things that we monitor. That's what the MSP of the future is, right? We're going to be managing disparate services that are all the same, right? To not use homogeneous again. But,
okay.
I make up most of the words I use. So you'll bear with me. But, I would say that
Sounds smart.
the breadth of, right, it works well, but the breadth of that, allows for you to have contextualization on every client. So if you look at that as a single pane of glass and think about what that looks like in the future, when you're not managing as many infrastructural loads, what does that single pane of glass give you? I would argue it gives you context. It gives you security context of where the data lives. I would argue that it is probably the very basis of a security single pane of glass, maybe as an overstep, but just consider what the future looks like from a cloud and SaaS management. If you started a new company today, would you buy a server? No. If you did, you're not talking to me. So, I think that the concept is that you're going to start seeing more and more of that as people that are traditional business owners that are fighting against competition, starting up that's agile, that has a very clear cost structure for their tools, that doesn't have infrastructural pains that make them slow potentially. I think you're going to start seeing a fast drive towards more and more SaaS adoption and more of things fitting in the similar buckets. And so you're going to look for platforms that bring that new world extensibility across all of those. So that's my plug there for Liongard. Yeah.
Appreciate that, guys. Modern IT, it's messy.
On the way, Matt Lee. Thank you. We appreciate it. you know what, we might as well just get this last question here. On the panels, everybody's kind of mentioned peer groups. Do you guys, you know, we're not a peer group, so we can talk about other peer groups. What do you guys recommend or have been involved in that may be good for anybody listening today?
How do you fight upstream on HTG? I mean, it's the very, very basis of our formation, or IT Nation Evolve, right? You know, that's one. Pax8 has a fairly decent starting on some of those peer groups as well. But, you know, I don't think I'd champion any one more than the fact that you should do it. The fact that this is one of the only industries where so much open sharing exists between companies. I'll gladly tell you anything that I learned a lesson on to just overall rise the tides and float all ships. And I think that, you know, to not take up a whole lot of time, I would say, you know, no matter which peer group, commit fully, hold accountable, hold yourself accountable, grow, right? And I think that's what develops a clear vision. That's what develops a good operational maturity level. That's what develops a lot of those things, is having, you know, outside accountability with a different view and a different paradigm than what you're looking at, that can give you some real context. I think what, you know, Kevin said, that SWAT that was in 2010 or so, or whenever that was, that told him what he had to change, that wouldn't have come from somebody sitting in his organization marching down the same path. That comes from extraneous involvement. And I think peer groups are great, trusted ways to do that. I mean, you know, go on and on, but no matter which one, start and commit hard.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'd say, you know, obviously HTG, we get together with other MSPs, just, you know, randomly, go have lunch, have discussions. Our local market, we've got some great competitors we share ideas with. Again, the you know, rise up the market, right? But I think I got a lot of value. I'm a Vistage member, and being in there and seeing what other industries are doing, because it kind of gives you that ability to see what your customer base is thinking and what the leadership of other industries are looking at. So it's kind of a combination. I agree. It's again, you know, as Matt said, you know, you have to be honest about it, be open, be willing to learn, and as Joe mentioned earlier, be willing to get punched in the jaw.
Yeah. I joined Evolve now, formerly ACG, back in 07, I think 07, and I had three or four employees then, and I've grown right through them. And they were the ones, Arlen, and came out and did my SWAT on my company, not for two different ones. But it has been invaluable in our growth, not only in business, but you know, from a holistic point of view. They tackle both work-life balance and you as a person, which is a little bit different than some of the other groups I've been involved in, where it's strictly financial. You'll get value from all, like anything in life, you'll get whatever you put into it, you'll get out of it. So, I mean, I think most people in this group are here and open because that is thread through their DNA. It's just, you know, we're willing to, there's not much I wouldn't share or be open about. And it's a pretty tight community. So
I think honestly, that's what makes the MSP ecosystem so unique. It's a highly functional ecosystem that involves peer, vendor, like just complete feedback that's very open. And for us as a vendor, when we you know, talk to an MSP and our MSP owner that is participating in a peer group, it's pretty clear to us who's checking in with their peers, either informally or formally, because they just have a maturity of thought process it's different. And so it's just, for us, we can see it, and we also see it in terms of growth, in terms of that MSP growing their customer base. There's just an intentional focus for growth.
All right, great. Well, we actually went the full hour. So back to back, we got people lined up for the next session. It's about security. So both Matts, Kevin, Joe, thank you for joining us.
Awesome.
Thanks, Mark.
Liongard, yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate all of y'all joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.